All right, well, good morning. We're going to finish out the 70 weeks of Daniel this morning, and then Brother Jeff will take over, and maybe in the new year we'll get into chapter number 10. So God has a marvelous historical plan for the nation of Israel, and that history has unfolded in our text and is unfolding in our time. Let's review what we've been looking at for those who may not have been with us last week before moving on. So the children of Israel have been in Babylonian captivity for around 67, 68 years. And God had determined that they would be in captivity for 70 years. So they are nearing the end of their captivity. Daniel, the prophet of God, is well aware of the statements made in Jeremiah and Isaiah. And in fact, we know from the early part of the chapter that he was actually reading in the book of Jeremiah. So he knows that the end of their captivity is very near. And with that knowledge, he begins to pray. He simply prays that God would do what he would do, that he would restore Israel and Jerusalem. Because at this stage, there was a very small remnant of Israelites living in Israel, and Jerusalem was in ruins. So then we come to the announcement of God in verse number 24. Gabriel tells Daniel, 70 weeks are determined upon thy people, upon Israel, and upon thy holy city, Jerusalem, to finish the transgression and to make an end of sins, and to make reconciliation for iniquity. Those three things are the negative things that are going to happen. Sin will be dealt with. Then Gabriel turns to the positive and says, and to bring an everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy, or to anoint the Holy of Holies. Now God says that there is a period of 70 sevens. And they are 70 sevens of years. And we looked at that in some detail last week, and Dan asked some good questions, so well done, Dan. So we're actually looking at a period of 490 years. And these have been determined. These have been cut out by God. These have been set aside, if you like, as a block of history in which God will deal with sin and bring in everlasting righteousness. So it is a block of history that is yet to come in the fulfillment of God's promise to the nation of Israel. And chapter number 9 deals with the nation of Israel. Now, when does this all begin? I've got our sequence. I have to quickly find a place in my outline. When does this all begin? Well, verse 25, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem. So we looked at this in some detail last week. We saw that the 490 year begins with a command or a decree to rebuild Jerusalem. Now we saw that there were 4 such decrees made that dealt with the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. There were 3 that dealt with the rebuilding of the temple, 1 that dealt with stopping the building, and there was only really 1 decree that dealt specifically with the decree to rebuild Jerusalem, and that was the decree of Artaxerxes. And this decree is stated in Nehemiah around 444 BC, 445 BC, give or take a couple of years. When did it end? Well, verse 25 tells us, unto the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublous times. So it would be 483 years unto the Messiah the Prince. From the restoration and the building decree to Messiah the Prince will be 483 years. And when he comes in that official presentation, we will see the completion of the 69th week. 70 weeks, and that will take us up to the 69th week. So in the first 7 weeks, the streets will be built again and the wall. And those terms really mean that the inside and outside of the city will be complete. The town centre will be built. The walls will be built. So in the first 49 years from Artaxerxes' decree, the city was rebuilt. And then in the years remaining to fulfill up the 438 years, the Messiah would come. And we saw that when Jesus came riding on the donkey, he presented himself as the Messiah, which is why it was called the triumphal entry of Jesus. And so the Word of God has given us this amazing, incredible, accurate prophecy. So let's pick up from where we left off last time, in verse 26. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself, and the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. And the end thereof shall be with a flood, and unto the end of war desolations are determined. I'd like to draw your attention to the first two words, and after. This is very important. After the 7 weeks and 62, after 69 weeks, shall Messiah be cut off. Notice it doesn't say during the 69 weeks, it says after the 69 weeks. And this is essential to understand the prophecy. Now we know from verse 27 that we have one more week left. Gabriel says, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. So what we have here between verses 26 and 27, and you saw it in the table that I did, is a gap. In verse 26, we're told that after the 69 weeks, but before you get to the last week, in verse 27, the Messiah will be cut off. So there's a gap there. Because we know we haven't seen the last week, but we know that we've seen Messiah crucified. So we're in this gap period. The 70 weeks did not run sequentially. And Daniel asked me a really good question last week, and one of the things I explained to him was the reason I went into so much depth and talked about the days of the month and all of this is because when you read commentaries, there are some very strange ideas. And people take the 70 weeks and they try to fit it into their version of history and their version of how it will come about. And there are people that say there has been no gap. And I'm just like, well then why are we not in the millennium kingdom and where's Jesus, you know? So it is important to understand these facts, and it'll become more apparent as we carry on through Daniel. But look now with me at verse 26. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off. That word cut off means to sever an object from its source. It means to cut into parts, and it implies a violent action and is used with the idea of to kill or to destroy. So what Gabriel is literally saying here is that after 62 weeks shall Messiah be killed. Now, I'm going to shrink this down because I chased a rabbit on this during my study. But you need to understand what is being said here. We're told that Messiah will come and present himself. And that brings us up to the 69 weeks. And now he's saying that after the 69 weeks, after he's presented himself as Messiah, he's saying that the Messiah will be killed. After 69 weeks, the 7 and the 62 weeks, Messiah will be killed. And clearly Scripture tells us that the Messiah had to die. Unfortunately, the Bible also tells us that the cross was a stumbling block to the Jews and that they could not perceive a crucified Messiah. They thought he was coming back to be king, to rule and to reign and to set them free. And he is. But that's at the end of the 70 weeks. Jesus even reprimanded his own disciples for their ignorance. Remember on the road to Emmaus, he opened the scripture and had to teach them the things concerning himself. Even the disciples couldn't even handle the fact that Jesus had to die. But here in Daniel is saying 69 weeks will pass, and after that the Messiah will be executed. And 69 weeks to the very day. And you remember we did the calculations, and when you work it all out, you get into that AD 33 kind of mark. But to the very day, Jesus rode into Jerusalem as Messiah the Prince, and after that, he was executed as a common criminal. All exactly as Daniel said it would happen. And I can't help but think of the tragedy of this situation. It was so tragic that they had waited all those centuries for their Messiah, but then they missed him. And when you see in Daniel where it clearly says the Messiah will come and the Messiah will be crucified, they still missed him. They hated him, they despised him, and they crucified him. Look back at verse number 26. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. Now, this phrase, but not for himself, is an obscure phrase in the Hebrew. I know that because all the commentaries told me that. I'm no Hebrew scholar. But everywhere I looked to try to get the gist of what was going on here, they all said, this is a difficult phrase to translate into English. And compiling it all together, the best way to translate it is like this: with nothing for himself. After 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, with nothing for himself. In other words, Messiah came, they executed him, and they gave him nothing. What should have been due him was not received by him. There was no honor, there was no respect, there was no love, and there was no acceptance. There was no receptivity. He came unto his own, and his own received him not. He was in the world. The world was made by him, and yet the world knew him not. Do you understand the irony here? His portion was nothingness. Verse 26, look at what happens next. And I'm bopping along on this. You guys sort of be, because I could be stopping. This is what happens next. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince shall come. Notice that we have a prince there, but it is a prince with a little p, not a big P. Who is the prince? Who is the prince that shall come? None other than the Antichrist. Now, I'm not going to develop this again because we've looked at it before, but you will remember in chapter 7, the little horn, and in chapter 8, the king of fierce countenance and the willful king. In the New Testament, he's called the man of sin, the man of perdition. He's never specifically called the Antichrist anywhere in the Bible. So after the 69 weeks, Messiah will be cut off. And then the people of the prince, the people of the Antichrist shall come. And the question is, who are the people? Who are the people of the prince? Well, Daniel outlines 4 world empires: Babylon, the Medo-Persians, the Greek, and the Roman. And we know from Daniel 2 that one of those kingdoms will be revived. And that's the Roman Empire. There will be a revival of the Roman Empire, and out of that 10-nation confederation will rise the one little horn, will rise the Antichrist. So the people of the prince that will come will be Roman. Now they may not be called Roman, but they will be the revived Roman Empire. So the Antichrist comes after the 483 years, after the 69 weeks. As we move to the end, Rome will rise again, and leading Rome will be the Antichrist. And we know this happens because we remember what happened in AD 70. Jerusalem was destroyed by the Roman empires. The Romans came in and utterly destroyed it. And I didn't really go into it because, again, chasing rabbits, but when you study out the historical records of what happened, it's horrific. It got so bad that the people were eating their children. I mean, it was just all sorts of, and the thousands of people that were killed on a daily basis is mind-numbing. The people of the prince, the Romans who came in AD 70, destroyed Jerusalem. Those that destroyed the temple were from the original Roman Empire. The Antichrist will be over the revived Roman Empire. And notice further in verse 26, he says, "And the end thereof shall be with a flood. And unto the end of the war desolations are determined." Until the end of the war, it says, desolations are determined. In other words, it will be a holocaust beyond any holocaust. What it is saying is the devastation that the nation of Israel will experience will come as a flood, and until it is finally over, until it comes to an end, there will be a constant desolation. And when you look at Israel's history, they have experienced a steady stream of desolation, which began with the destruction of Israel in AD 70. They've also had to endure the medieval crusades. And folks, the crusades were not as holy and righteous as history sometimes paints. The knights that left England to go and rescue Jerusalem wanted the treasure, and they killed people along the way, Jewish people along the way, so they didn't have to split the treasure with them. There was the Spanish Inquisition, the Russian pogroms, and then of course Hitler's demonic Nazi Holocaust. And there's a whole lot of skirmishes in between that. And what's happening right now? Israel's fighting a war on about 8 different fronts. And yet the rise of the Antichrist will commence a satanically inspired and empowered Holocaust beyond anything that Israel has previously experienced. And when you look back into history and see the destruction, the mayhem, and the murder that Israel has had to endure over all the years since AD 70, and you understand that what the Antichrist is going to bring in is going to be way beyond that, it's incomprehensible. It really is. So you see, after the 483 years, the Messiah will be cut off and there will be desolation in the land. And that's what happened. Look at verse 27. "And he, the prince that shall come, the Antichrist, shall confirm the covenant," which is a treaty or a peace agreement in modern terms, "with many," that's talking about the Jews, "for 1 week," or 7 years. Again, verse 27 supports the idea of a gap between Daniel's 69th and 70th week. Now this time gap allows for the church age, which is the age that we are in. And this church age was not revealed in the Old Testament and has only been revealed in the New Testament. That's why the Lord could say, "No man knows the hour nor the day," or the day nor the hour. Folks, it's not for us to know the times and the seasons. It's not for us to know when the 70th week comes to an end. If it was all exactly 490 years from start to finish, then all of us would know. And Jesus would be a liar. But he said, "No man knows the day nor the hour." And so they will make a covenant. They being the Jews, they being Israel will make a covenant with the Antichrist, the final ruler of the revived Roman Empire. but he is a liar. He is vile, right out of the pits of hell. And isn't it interesting the level of anti-Semitism that is arising today? And it's becoming quite public, and it's becoming quite acceptable to express your displeasure or outright hatred of Israel and of the Jews. And this Antichrist is going to come up, and he may not outwardly be anti-Semitic, but it will come out. Because verse 27 tells us that in the midst of the week, in the middle of the week. So if it is a 7-year period and it's in the middle, we're talking in 3.5 years. So a treaty is made in the middle of or 3.5 years. He shall cause the sacrifice and the oblation to cease. Did you get that? Folks, before a sacrifice and oblation can cease, what do you have to have? Yeah. And you have to have a sacrifice and oblation. Brother Dave's getting ahead. He's trying to steal my thunder. But you need to have a sacrifice and oblation. And before you have a sacrifice and oblation, what do you have to have? You have to have a temple. I believe that one of the things the Antichrist is going to do is to assist the Jews, to assist Israel in the restoration of the temple. And just bear in mind that right now, the Temple Mount is in Islamic hands. And there's an Islamic temple on the mount, which is where the temple would be built. So how this happens, I don't know. But somehow he has to get the Muslims to hand over the Temple Mount to the Israelites and then allow them to, destroy or to pull down the mosque. I don't know how it's going to pass, but he's going to do it. So you can tell this guy is going to be one major politician. And the fact that he could do this, that he could get the Temple Mount back into Israelite hands, that they could get the temple rebuilt and the sacrifices and the oblations started. This could be the thing that makes the Israelites sign the treaty with them. I don't know if it is, but it seems feasible to me. They may be so overawed at his ability to pull all that off that they willingly sign this treaty with him. We know from Revelation that it says that he comes conquering with a bow, but no arrows. It seems that he conquers by peace. He is a statesman who is unequaled in history. His mouth speaks great things, but his forces behind him provide the intimidation factor. And it's interesting when you look at history, there are 2 US presidents that have often used the phrase peace through strength. Reagan was the first, and now Donald Trump. Now, I'm not suggesting that either one of these guys is the Antichrist, although a lot of people will probably think Trump's a pretty good candidate. And I don't think it's going to be those guys, because I don't think America will be the world power at the time that this is all going on. However, I think this concept is one that the Antichrist will use. He will come proclaiming and preaching peace through strength, and he will use that to conquer the world. So it's very interesting when you're studying in Daniel and you see all this stuff and you start looking around and you've got peace through strength and you've got this anti-Semitism and you've got all this war and stuff going on in the Middle East. Very interesting times that we live in. So a statesman is able to negotiate the right things for Israel. Security in the land, a temple in the land, and a right to worship in the land. But in the middle of that 7-year period, which is known as the Great Tribulation, he stops the whole thing, and in its place, he brings an overspreading of abomination and he shall make it, the temple, desolate. So right in the middle, for the first 3.5 years, the Israelites have got peace, they're in their land, they've got their temple, they're worshipping, and then he stops the whole thing. And then he makes the temple desolate. How does he do it? He stands in the temple and blasphemy, declares himself to be God, and thus becomes the ultimate abomination, becomes the ultimate idol. Furthermore, the Antichrist makes desolate by desecrating the temple as he sets himself up as an idol in the holy place reserved solely for Jehovah God. In true Roman style, he sets himself up as the only deity and the only deity to be worshipped. And that goes on for 3.5 years. And what makes, what's really interesting about this is what's happening to Christianity today. Like, it has really been pushed down. It has really been pushed out of schools, out of work, out of society. It is really, the world, the religious system is really working hard to minimize the effect of godly Christians in the community. And this man comes and sets himself up as the only God, the only deity to be worshipped. And right now you think, well, how's that going to happen? Well, look around at what's happening with society. As the godly influence is taken out, the ungodly is coming in. And I don't think it'll be a big stretch by any imagination. And he shall make it, the temple, desolate, even unto the consummation, or until the end, or until the finish. And that determined shall be poured upon the desolation. Folks, this is what Jesus meant when he said, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, then don't wait. Get out of Jerusalem as fast as you can, for there will be a time of trouble, such as not have been seen from the beginning of the world until now, no, and never shall be. Here we have the interpretation of Jesus concerning the event Gabriel describes here in verse number 27. The event has to be future to the time of Christ, and since nothing like it corresponds to the 7-year period, it is a future event for us as well. In summary, it can be concluded that Daniel's great prophecy of the 77 comprehends the total history of Israel from the time of Nehemiah in 444 BC until the second coming of Jesus Christ. In the first 7-year period, the first seven, the city and the streets are rebuilt. In the second period of 62 sevens, which follows, the Messiah appears and is living at the conclusion of this period. In the parentheses, between the 69th and 70th seven, at least 2 major events take place. The cutting off of Messiah, the death of Jesus Christ on the cross, and the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. Actually, the whole present age intervenes in that period. The final period of 7 years begins with the introduction of a covenant relationship between the future prince that shall come and the many, the people of Israel. The covenant is observed for the first half of the future 7-year period. Then the special liberties and protections granted Israel are taken away, and Israel becomes persecuted in their time of great tribulation. The beginning of the last 3.5 years of 77s of Daniel is marked by the desecration of the future temple, the stopping of the sacrifices, and the desolation of the Jewish religion. It is this period referred to by Christ as the Great Tribulation in Matthew 24. The culmination of the entire prophecy of 70 weeks is the second advent of Jesus Christ, which closes the 77s of Israel, as well as the times of the Gentiles pictured in Daniel's prophecies of the 4 great world empires. For most of the period, the two great lines of prophecy relating to the Gentiles and Israel run concurrently, and both end with the same major event, the second advent of Jesus Christ, when oppressed Israel is delivered and the oppressor, the Gentile, is judged. With Israel today back in the land, the tensions in the Middle East, and the West abandoning God, the fulfillment of these prophecies may not be too distant. And that closes out the 70 weeks of Daniel. Thank you for your attention.